It's time to fasten your seatbelt and rev up that engine. It's time to go on Pit Row. On Pit Row is your weekly look inside the world of NASCAR. Now live, here's the pit crew, Steve Ronkowitz and Charlie Turner.
Boogity, boogity, boogity. Let's go on Pit Row, boys.
Hey, we made it this far.
Hey, that's better than some weeks.
Well, hey, welcome NASCAR fans to this week's edition of the live on Pit Row Hangout. Live NASCAR Hangout on Pit Row. Let me get this right. We've only been doing it for 13 years. Joined by a newbie this week, my veteran cohorts, Steve Ronkowitz over there in Sylvania House. Say hi, Steve.
Hey, everybody.
Dan Beaver down in Texas. Dan's having some connection issues, so we hope we can keep him the whole show. And a new friend of ours, Leon Hammock, who is in Arizona somewhere and was at the big race weekend in Phoenix this past weekend. Hey, Leon, welcome to On Pit Row.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed the weekend, and thanks for the invite. Yuma, Arizona is where I'm sitting.
There you go, Yuma, Arizona. Okay, well, anyway, let's get into this thing because we very well could be cut off by the internet gods today if this doesn't go the way we planned. And let's start with a brief recap of the big race, at the big Sprint Cup race at Phoenix this past weekend. Dan, you managed to watch the whole thing. There's Beth Ann's joining us too, so good we got the whole crew in here today. What'd you think? I mean, it was the Kevin Harvick show for most of it until the end when all the chase stuff got to be the subject.
You know, it was the Kevin Harvick show, but the chase pretty much dominated it before that as well. At some point, everybody was outside of the elimination bubble based on points, including Harvick. So it became apparent that he was going to have to win that race if he wanted to advance. It was apparent that any of the other drivers that weren't in contention probably might have to win also. Then Logano, Hamlin had their problems for a little bit, gave Keselowski and the other guys, Kenseth, a breath of life. And Gordon was that guy that just was always right there on that razor's edge of whether or not one guy would fall far enough down the points that he could make it in. So the chase did what NASCAR wanted to do. It gave us a secondary storyline for a time like this when Kevin Harvick or someone like Kevin Harvick is stinking up the show. With a perfect driver rating, that means that you're going to lead the most laps. That means you're going to spend all your time in the front of the pack. And that's going to happen from time to time. So in this case, I think NASCAR achieved one of their goals, and that's to keep that secondary storyline going.
Did everybody else enjoy it? I mean, it definitely, this new chase format definitely created drama throughout almost the whole second half of the season, really. Although it's different kind of drama than we've had in the past as a long-time NASCAR fans. Anybody got a problem with it? Leon, what do you think? I mean, this is not traditional NASCAR racing, not how we're arriving at this championship. Do you like it, or what do you think?
I think it's outstanding. I think that what NASCAR wanted to do was to bring drama into the NFL part of their season, and in my opinion, I think it has done just that. As we've all seen during the course of the year, lots of vacant seats. From my standpoint, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, every day was more and more, with Sunday being sold out. There were a few empty seats, but there was a lot of people there. There was a lot of buzz, and my input when I was walking through the garage area all weekend, you could feel the tension. You knew this was special.
Steve, what do you think? I mean, you're a long-time stock car fan. I think you probably, my thought is you probably don't like it much, but what do you think?
I look at it in a couple of different ways. First of all, it really kind of upsets me the fact that we went to a chase so that we wouldn't have this ridiculous thing of someone who didn't win a race have the chance to win a championship. And where are we sitting right now? We're sitting with 4 people, and we have the distinct possibility of somebody who never won a race all year winning a championship. So we're right back where we came from. I agree with Leon 100%. There was more buzz on this race. I read more about people who said, hey, I was watching a football game, I switched to the race, and I never left the race. On the second hand, there were people that says, that race was so awful at the beginning. I switched to the football game. I was lucky that I came back and got to see the end, because the end was what it was all about. Swapping position, how are guys going to do this? We talk about it all the time. The ability to have guys make different decisions at different times during the race is what it was all about in the 90s, in the early thousands, about seeing these guys race, making decisions, different strategies. I love that part of this thing, and that's the one thing that this chase has really done.
Beth Ann, well, we just lost her. I was just going to ask Beth Ann what she thought. You know, I haven't decided how I feel about this yet. I acknowledge the increase in interest. There's no question that, you know, you don't know what's going to happen. You have to tune in. You can't. There is a negative. You can't watch one of these races now unless you can hear the commentary, because you can't tell what the hell's going on with the championship stuff, no matter how you try to follow these scrolls and everything. So you know, it does keep you in front of the TV. Beth, I was just going to ask you. I know you're back with us. We lost you for a second. What do you think? I mean, do you like this new format, or do you like the old days when you know, the leader, the guy who leads the whole season, wins the championship?
Well, I think it's more interesting because you know, you get the chance. Maybe somebody new will win. You know, instead of seeing the same old people all the time. Certainly there aren't going to be the same 4 people that you expected here in this final, at least not for me anyway.
So an interesting comment today from Monty Dutton on Facebook that you've got this chase now with these 4 drivers, 2 of whom have just kind of been also-rans all year, Ryan Newman and Denny Hamlin, and 2 drivers who have been contenders and won a lot of races and been up front all year are out, Jeff Gordon and Brad Keselowski. Dutton's point is, you know, are you really getting the best of the best here? And I think he makes a very valid point that we're not really getting the best 4 drivers in this last race. Is the flukiness of this thing? Do we need to tweak this thing down to where they cut it sooner? I don't know. I think I kind of agree with Dutton.
Well, NASCAR got exactly what they wanted. Exactly what they wanted was to be able to turn racing into a stick and ball sport. Yep. So we got a wild card team that has a chance to win the World Series. We've got a wild card team that has a chance to win the Super Bowl. And that's exactly what NASCAR wanted. They wanted to turn this thing into a stick and ball playoff type of deal, and that's exactly what they got. So it would be, as I say, very, you know, ironic, and it would be very fitting, actually, if you would have guys who don't win races win a championship. Happened in baseball this year. Happens in football all the time.
Okay, the last qualifying position, the last guy to make it to the final, to the big final race next week, was Ryan Newman, who got into Kyle Larson on the last lap, or the second to last lap of the race, put him in the wall, which basically knocked Jeff Gordon out of it. Anybody got a problem with that?
That's racing.
I don't have a problem with it per se, or just on the face of it. But this overly aggressive racing, this dirty racing that we've seen in the last couple of weeks, Keselowski at Texas, not dirty necessarily, but certainly over-aggressive. What we saw Keselowski and Kenseth doing at the end of Charlotte, that's not what I think of as racing. If you can catch somebody, running over them is something else. You need to pass them cleanly, or there are at least some of us that believe that. There are also people that have joined here recently that like the carnage, like that kind of that kind of style of racing, and I don't happen to be one of them. And I think this is a bad trend overall, and it's boiling over into the pits, and it's creating the kind of havoc that we're seeing, that we saw at Charlotte and we saw at Texas, and I think it puts us all in a bad light.
Sounded to me, Leon, like you're going to jump in on the opposite side of that argument. Go ahead. What do you think?
Well, it is racing. I mean, who does people revere? Dale Earnhardt Sr. He wasn't exactly the cleanest race car driver. He put fear in people when they looked in the rearview mirror and saw that black number 3. However, wrecking people just to wreck people is not the way to go. But this is a contact sport, and that old phrase, rubbing is racing, sometimes goes to extreme. And when you're down at the end of the season, and when the pressure from the sponsors, because the chase is big money and everybody reaps big money, and it's return on investment from the sponsors. They want their man in the final race. They want TV time. And I saw this weekend that you could feel the pressure that was on the race teams to perform. It is a performance sport.
And
Go ahead,
I would
I'm
have
sorry.
said the same thing about Dale Earnhardt, or did say the same thing about Dale Earnhardt Sr. in his heyday. I'm not a Dale Sr. fan, and the reason I was not a Dale Sr. fan was because of his style of racing. Often dirty, always aggressive, and I don't like that coming back into the sport, but that's a personal preference, and I'll accept that. One thing you do have to give Newman credit for is everybody says they would run over their grandmother to get to the chase or to win the championship. Where his mouth was, and Larson learned a lesson not to open up the inside lane where when someone's got that kind of attitude behind them or that kind of pressure. And I think Gordon should have learned that lesson, should have already known it at Texas when he opened the inside to Brad Keselowski. If this kind of stuff's going to happen, you have to be situationally aware that it can happen, and you're going to have to start racing a little more intelligently.
How about you, Beth? Where do you fall on the aggressive racing or dirty racing or just racing side of this argument?
Well, I've never been fond of the sort of dirty racing that goes on. I sort of like it to be more about the talent and not just because somebody nerfed somebody out of the way to win a race. So it's kind of where I am.
Steve?
Well, you can't have it both ways, I think is my feeling on this thing. Either Brad Keselowski is the dirtiest thing in the world and he tried to shoot a gap and wreck Jeff Gordon. That kind of racing, we can't have it. But on the same token, there was nobody who really took Newman to task for
not at all. Nobody said a word.
Not at all. For literally blasting him out of the way. There was no accident there. That was not an accident. That was a calculated move that he was going to slam him out of the way, and he did it.
Yeah,
and
there was no arguably small or too small or just big enough hole that he was trying to go through. There was a whole frickin' racetrack.
Right. And the only thing that the commentators made the point of, well, he was up next to him, so it was okay. Well, it's still not okay. Even when you're next to him, you don't just slam somebody into the wall. I've been to enough racetracks in my life that would not go over well in the back end of most racetracks.
Here's a couple of things that I noticed that it was either Friday or Saturday. I think it was Saturday. I saw several of the drivers being interviewed about what happened on the track the previous week at Texas and whether or not they thought Keselowski was right or wrong, whether or not they thought that what happened after the race was right or wrong. And one of the drivers I saw interviewed was Ryan Newman, and Newman said he didn't see that Keselowski really did anything wrong. He thinks it was all just about the intensity of what NASCAR has created, which I agree with him completely. He said it's all about the pressure. Everybody's feeling pressure. You got to do stuff. And he didn't have a problem with what Keselowski did. So saying after he said that, I didn't have a problem with what Newman did on the racetrack. All right, because at least he did not do something that he was condemning Brad Keselowski for doing 2 weeks ago, as some of these other guys were. That said, several of the other drivers I saw interviewed, Denny Hamlin, Kevin Harvick, Jimmy Johnson, those are three that I can remember that were kind of in the same segment I was watching, all kind of said they really didn't have a problem with the way Keselowski raced on the racetrack. They didn't like the fact that he didn't apologize for it after it happened in the pits. And frankly, I think that's just bullshit. I mean, the guy is being honest. He's not sorry for what he did, but they want him to act like he's sorry, like they do. This is the part that drives me nuts about this NASCAR stuff. Is these guys want to be these, Saturday night racers on the racetrack, and then when they get in the pits, they want to be these sponsored glamour dolls and pretend like everything's, it's okay. Let me pick up my son here and hold him and pat him on the butt. And I would never get wrecked because I'm a father. It's just, NASCAR has begotten what they have, okay, and I don't know that this is going to change next year. I think they like what they've got so far, but I have more trouble with the guys that are mad at Keselowski than I do with Keselowski.
Yeah, and I didn't have a problem last week with what Keselowski did. I still don't have a problem with what Keselowski did. And there is a difference between him trying to shoot a gap and Newman just basically intentionally wrecking someone to gain that one position. So my point was that the other drivers are going to have to be aware that this kind of sometimes aggressive, sometimes dirty racing is going to happen. And Harvick, no one questioned whether or not someone would take out Harvick because he didn't let them get close enough to him to take him out.
That's right. They couldn't get to him. But I'll tell you something. I don't think if Jeff Gordon could have gotten to him, I don't think he would have taken him out. That's why Jeff Gordon's stuck on 4. All right.
Right.
That's one of the reasons he's stuck on 4.
No, I agree with that wholeheartedly. And Larson wouldn't have been taken out if he'd have taken the bottom side of the track. Newman wouldn't have been able to run him down into the inside wall. Gordon wouldn't have been wrecked at Texas if it had taken the inside lane instead of the outside lane on the restart. So some of it's bad decisions by these drivers who are not yet, haven't figured out what the trend is going to be in NASCAR. And if they don't figure it out relatively quickly, they're going to become just the carnage that everybody else is leaving in their wake.
One last comment about Dale Sr. And Dan, I agree with you. I was never a Dale Sr. fan, but he did have that uncanny knack of being able to run somebody over, go talk to them after the race, and convince that person that they ran into him.
That's a true story, too.
I'm sorry I made you hit me.
That's right. Exactly. It's the same thing as the Bobby Allison story about how Cale Yarborough kept running his face into his fist.
And Earnhardt also had an uncanny knack for wrecking people without ever touching them. And he could use the wind off of a car better than absolutely anybody else in the history of the sport.
Yeah, that legend that he could see the wind. You have to, when you watch those races, you almost have to believe it. Okay, so we're going to another. We've got one more race left in this thing. There's 4 drivers involved. 4 drivers can win the Sprint Cup Championship. All they got to do is finish ahead of the other 3 this week at Homestead, Miami. What does that set up? What do you expect? Beth, what do you expect? You think Denny Hamlin will wreck those other 3 guys to get to the front? Will Kevin Harvick? Well, I think we know Ryan Newman would.
We know that answer.
I don't think Kevin Harvick would have a problem with wrecking them to get to the front either. I guess that depends on how close they are to the finish and who's in whose way.
Well, I think the better question to ask Charlie is: would Brad Keselowski wreck those 3 guys for Joey Logano to win?
Yes.
Would would the team? Where do the teammates fall within this whole thing? That's the interesting question.
It is. I mean, I don't have any answers at all. That's Leon. What do you think? I mean, what's going to happen? You got Keselowski out there who's going to be running. He's going to be playing left guard for Joey Logano. I don't know. Newman has the whole Austin, the whole Dillon clan to run for him. It's like the James gang. I don't know. What are we going to do here?
It could be very interesting. My question is, Keselowski has no friends. At least that's what it appears to be. Is there going to be retribution from somebody to Keselowski that can prevent him from taking out one of the other 4 people? It could be. It could be a nice, clean race where everybody just races their butt off and the best car, the best setup wins. Or there could be some retribution from 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks ago display themselves in Miami. But I think the bottom line is those 4 guys are going to be the pressure is going to be ratcheted so heavily. I think it's going to be a heck of a race. I think it's probably going to be a clean race, but I think it's going to be a hard, clean race. Dan, because I don't think NASCAR is going to take any of those guys punting each other.
Yeah, I don't know. Dan, what do you think?
NASCAR hasn't done anything about them punting each other up until now.
Exactly.
So if NASCAR hasn't shown a willingness to police what's going on, I don't know that they're gonna change their attitude at Homestead. And one of the things that we saw at Phoenix that no one really has referenced, Casey Kane rubbing alongside of Ryan Newman midway through the race when he tried to make himself hard to pass. He didn't quite have the car or the skill to stay there, but he ran into the side of Newman sometime during the second 2/3 of the race, somewhere in there. And nobody mentioned that except, gee, I hope they didn't cut a tire. Was about the only comment that got made. That was, you could see that same kind of decision process going through Kane's mind as to whether or not, how much can I get away with, what can I do, and how much is this going to come back on me, like Clint Boyer spent at Richmond a couple of years back. And he made the decision not to rub him again. But he did run into the side of him, and he had plenty of room to miss him when he did it.
We've got 4 different teams involved in this chase, too. 4 drivers, but 4 different teams. All 3 manufacturers in there. It's almost like NASCAR picked this out of a hat. You know, you got 2 Chevy teams, and Chevy's been the dominant, I guess, maybe kind of the dominant manufacturer this year, although Ford's been really good. You got one of the best 2 Fords in there. You got a Toyota, you know, at least from the best Toyota team. I don't know. Toyota's been very good this year. You've got some other stories there. You know, Harvick used to drive for Childress. Newman used to drive for Stewart. You know, Harvick's kind of in Newman's old car. You know, what other stories we got? This is gonna be. I think it's fascinating. I don't know if the race is gonna be the most interesting thing. It's more like the chess game.
Well, the other part is that you've got a playoff system that really doesn't have 4 huge names in it. I mean, Kevin Harvick, yeah, pretty big. Denny Hamlin, you know. I mean, these guys aren't the 4 top names in the sport that are running for the championship. I mean, you've got yourself a St. Louis, Kansas City World Series going on here.
You've also got, I don't know if we've said this before or when I glitched out, but you got a first-time champion this year. So one way or the other, no matter what happens. Yeah. I'm kind of hoping that Ryan Newman wins the championship and finishes 30th.
And that possibility of a first-time champion, that may be exciting to a lot of viewers. That, you know, Jimmy Johnson's not there. You know, the normal heads that have been there for the last 10 years. It may create some excitement in Miami this weekend for some of the less avid fans. That, hey, we got some new names here. Let's check it out.
I think you're probably right there, Leon. But here's what I think. I think NASCAR would rather this was an all-star final with 4 big names in it. Jeff Gordon, Jimmy Johnson, Dale Earnhardt Jr., and Danica Patrick. That would be their all-star final 4. That's what they care about. And I think they have more of a story if Jimmy Johnson's going for number 7, Jeff Gordon's going for number 5, you know, Stewart's making some kind of comeback thing, whatever. Danica's the first woman who ever, you know, did anything. Sorry, Beth, don't mean to diss on the women, but I think NASCAR would rather have that. So you may have a portion of the fan base that was sick of Jimmy Johnson, but whenever you have that guy who's tough to beat, you've got those 2 factions. You know, you've got his big fan base that's cheering for him and the big fan base that's cheering against him. And I think in the long run, NASCAR gets bigger crowds out of that. But we'll see. I think they did about as well. They have more interest by having these 4 drivers involved in this the way they did it this year than they would have had if this were a traditional series and they ran. And at the end of after 35 races, you had these 4 drivers were the only ones that could contend for the championship. Then it would really be boring, I think. But we'll see. I mean, there's a lot of fans out there. Harvick has fans. I don't know who's got the biggest fan base of those guys that are in there. I don't know. Nobody. Maybe.
Probably Harvick. I would have settled for the 4 strongest teams making it into the final 4.
Right, which they didn't get that either.
They got 50% of that, and that'll be this week's editorial in On Pit Row magazine. Just NASCAR almost got it right. They missed on one thing, and that was getting a winless driver into the final.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, before we get into, we're going to do a little bit of a fantasy prediction for the weekend. For Dan always does that for us, so we can keep his connection there. But we did have one of the big, I think, one of the big story, and Leon was down there to capture it with some great photographs. Chase Elliott clinched the NASCAR Nationwide Series championship, the youngest driver to ever do that. 18 years old, graduated from high school this summer. The son of Austin Bill from Dawsonville, great. Probably the next big thing to come out of the lower series to move up in the Cup. What do you think? How big a story is that, Steve? I know you're a big Bill Elliott fan. Do you get the same charge following Chase as you did following Bill?
I don't get the big excitement from Chase. I don't think Chase has really found himself yet, and I think that's due to the fact that he's 18 years old. You really don't know anything about Chase other than the fact that he's a damn good race car driver and he's Bill Elliott's son. I think over the next couple of years, as Chase matures, as you get more TV time, as he gets more TV time, more interest is paid upon him. I think at that point you may figure out whether or not this is somebody that you're going to follow and what the fan base is going to be. But at this point, he's Bill Elliott's son is about the only thing that you really got going on, other than the fact that he's an 18-year-old that won a championship. I mean, that's pretty damn impressive in and of itself. But I don't think there's star power to be followed there yet.
Leon, what did you see when you were there, right there, firsthand, covering the story? What was the sense you got out of it?
I kind of followed him around the garage area and watched people interview him. And the lady that was sitting next to me in the media center was from Fox Sports 1. So I quizzed her a little bit about Chase Elliott, and what she told me, because I said, what is he like? He comes across as a good kid. She said, he's a very well-mannered, polite young man that has a good head on his shoulders, and her view was she thinks he's going to go far. What I saw was pretty much exactly the same thing. When I heard him speak to Bob Dillner in the different interviews, he comes across as being a well-grounded young man that's on a mission. And I think that, and he's doing it, Chase Elliott style, not Dad doing it all for him at this point. I think that he's going to be the next big thing. That's my personal view.
I've interviewed him a time or two. He reminds me of Logano when Logano was down in the K&N series and what have you. It was that same. He was the same person. Happy to be there. Knew that he had talent. Was very grateful for what he was getting, and now Logano is blossoming into his own. And I think Logano's still remains one of the nicer drivers that you have a chance to run across. And I don't think there's a reason for Chase to drop that, except the top for him, I think, is a little greater than it was for Logano in terms of fan base, because he's already got that Bill Elliott fan base to jump from. I think he's much more likely to assume Bill's fans than Dale Jr. was to assume Dale Sr.'s fans, because Chase has a driving style that's more similar to Bill's than Jr.'s was to Sr.'s. So I think he's going to get Bill's fans. I think he's going to keep Bill's fans. I think he's going to be a great driver, but whether or not it goes to his head, to Steve's point, we just won't know until we know.
You better find a goddamn Ford to get into, though.
I knew that was coming. Okay, here, real quick. We're running long today because there's a lot to talk about. It's a great week to be talking about NASCAR. We put up on our Facebook page yesterday a question to generate some comments for our Shell Saver Card Comment of the Week prize, which is a $50 Shell Saver gift card. And the question was, so who do you like this weekend? Who's your pick to win the Sprint Cup Championship at Homestead Miami Speedway? We're going to get into that after we do our fantasy segment here, but we need to cover that Shell thing, Steve. What do these people get?
Well, just make sure that you submit that Shell Saver Card comment of the day. You can take home a $50 Shell gift card. And, of course, anytime Joey Logano, driver of that 22 Shell Pennzoil Ford Fusion, wins a 2014 race, you got one more shot at it there, Joey. Shell Saver Card holders can save 22 cents per gallon on any grade of Shell nitrogen-enriched gasoline or Shell diesel just by using their Shell Saver Card on the Wednesday after the race. Offer valid up to 25 gallons. You can go to shell.us/Wednesday for more details if you haven't flippin' figured it out by now.
There you go. We've given away about 35 of those cards this year, thanks to our friends at Shell Gasolines. Okay, so we do have one more race left on not just the NASCAR Sprint Cup schedule, but the NASCAR Fantasy Racing schedule for those who are playing the fantasy games. And we have the best fantasy racing expert anywhere on our show every week, Dan Beaver. Dan, tell us, walk us through Homestead. What should we expect? We'll keep our fingers crossed that we keep our connection for another 5 minutes or so here.
Yeah, and I'll run through it quickly, and then I'll come back and start to give details, just in case, for that same reason. The playoffs, I think, the chase has brought the cream to the top, and that continues here. If you manage to save allocations for those drivers who are in or recently were in chase contention, those are the guys that are going to run the best at Homestead. In Group A, you've got Harvick and Gordon that are going to challenge for top fives. Gordon, the first thing he said when he went across the finish line after learning that he was out was, let's go win Homestead. It's all we can do. Harvick knows that if he wins the championship, so he's also going to be up there in the top five. And he's not going to worry about it too much if Gordon's the guy ahead of him, so long as it's not Logano, Hamlin, or Newman. I think the guys that are giving the championship to Harvick are forgetting just how consistent Logano has been up until now, and I think that's going to pay dividends. So if you saved back a Logano allocation, you might as well use it. Down in Group B, though, you've got some nice choices. Martin Truex Jr. has a very long streak of top tens. Ryan Newman proved that he'll do what it takes to get in and stay in the top 10, and Denny Hamlin's got that same drive. So if you've got allocations for those guys, they're the ones that are going to be there at the front. Down in Group C, Larson, Dillon, still going to dominate. Larson's going to run the table like I predicted 5, 6, 7 weeks ago, whatever it was. And with his one accident in Martinsville aside, he will again. Dillon will continue to be the second place guy. So whether or not you've got points for those guys will determine whether or not you start them. Allgaier is probably the next best guy in line. He's got a couple of really strong runs on the similarly configured mile-and-a-half tracks. This is not one of them, but it takes some of the same skill. And his runs at Kansas and Charlotte, I think, bode well for how he will do here. Or Texas. I don't have my notes right in front of me because I'm rushing through this a little bit. But so Allgaier, I think, is your next best bet down there. Trevor Bayne is in the lineup this week, but Wood Brothers have not been doing very well with him over the last several races. I think it's been 4 or 5 races since he finished in the top 25. I would avoid him unless you're absolutely desperate. And I'd avoid Danica this week unless you're absolutely desperate. The pit crew swap worked much better for Busch than it did for Danica. She did have some momentum before this happened. I don't think you can blame it all on her, although I'm sure a lot of people out there will and would like to. But she definitely lost her what momentum she had with fairly solid runs once they did the pit crew swap or the team swap. So Allgaier is your best value of those guys, and I think that's the way you got to go. So, but Gordon, I think it's drive that's going to get him there. He has pride on the line. He also has the best 3-year average finish of all of the guys that were in chase contention entering last week. Had he made it, he would have been the favorite, I think, to win the championship because of his recent Homestead record. Harvick and Logano both have finished in the top 10 in recent races. Logano has 1, Harvick has 3, but neither of them have a top 5 in the last 3 years. Hamlin's victory last year says a lot for him, but it stands out too. It's not his trend at Homestead. And Newman's 3rd place finish 2 years ago makes him the other driver with the top 5, but he's not capable of finishing in the top 5 right now. I think he has 2 top 5s since he crashed at Watkins Glen, and one of those was at Talladega, so it doesn't count for handicapping purposes. Shouldn't count for anything, but it doesn't count for handicapping purposes. So those are your guys that are going to be running well, and of them, I think Gordon's got the best shot to win. Harvick's probably next. Logano's probably, or actually, Gordon, Logano, Harvick. will be battling for the lead. They'll probably finish in the top 3.
All right. There you have it, folks. There's a synopsis of what to expect this weekend. We're going to get into more detail on fantasy racing later in the week when we do our fantasy racing pits, Dan Beaver's fantasy racing pit stop on Thursday. But we're in this position now. Everybody's got to make their picks. This is where you get put on the spot. Leon, you get to be part of the pressure this week. We get to put the pressure on you. Make you make a pick. I'm going to go first though, because even though I'm locked into picking Jimmy Johnson, because Dan held me to something I shut my mouth off about 4 weeks ago. If I had a pick, I'd pick Joey Logano, because I picked him. I thought earlier in the year that this is Logano's year to win a championship. I still think that car might be strong enough to pull it out. I have a lot of faith in Roger Penske and Penske's organization to get it done this weekend. So I'm going with Logano. Who you got, Steve-O?
I am also going to go with Logano, but I'm going to have a caveat in there. I still think, and I said this all year long, that if that Kyle Larson's going to find a way to win a race, so I'm going to kind of hedge my bet on those two a little bit. But if I had to put money on it, I'd go Logano.
All right, Leon. I'm just going to go right to left. You're next up. Who do you think? Who's your pick to win the race this weekend?
Well, in my fantasy league that I run, I have Jeff Gordon at Homestead.
All right, so you're going with Beaver. Beaver already likes you better than he likes me. All right. All right, Dan, you sticking with your prediction there? You got Gordon for the win?
I'll take Gordon for the win. And I'm kind of like Steve. I'd hedge my bets with Larson. Wouldn't be surprised if he got it, but can't predict it.
All right, Beth Ann, you get the bit play cleanup this week. I think she's going with Logano too.
I'm going with Logano.
Yeah, I thought so. All right, so
I picked him to win the championship a long time ago. So.
All right.
Just don't let anybody at FedEx see that she went with Logano and not Hamlin.
You know, I almost took Hamlin here because Hamlin has won at Homestead, and I just did it. I don't know. I just got a kind of a hunchy feeling on that track that he might be a player, might be a top fiver. And it's going to be really interesting to see who's in the top 10 of that race on the last 3 restarts. Because if it happens like it did this past week, with about 25 laps to go, you're going to get restarts every 5 laps or so. NASCAR will be throwing rubbers out on the track and all over the place trying to get these things to restart, and it should be a lot of fun. That's where I think Jeff Gordon's not going to get the win, because I think there will be restarts at the end. So anyway, thanks everybody for joining us this week. Thanks, Leon, for the first time. Great job down at Phoenix getting those shots. Beth Ann's leaving for Homestead, I don't know, about 24 hours from now, something like that. Dan, you got lucky. The connection hung together. Steve, great job as always.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
You all enjoy it, and we'll be back next week to talk about who won the 2014 Sprint Cup Championship.
You've just been on Pit Row, and now you're up to speed with the best information about the world of NASCAR. Come back next week and join the pit crew, Steve and Charlie, and go on Pit Row. On Pit Row is a presentation of Bench Racing Productions.
Hey, folks, this is Jeff Hammer from NASCAR on Fox, and you are listening to On Pit Row.
This is On Pit Row. On Pit Row.